Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pacific Hermitage live stream, Hermitage Conversations. I'm Ajahn Chunda,
Nisabho.
although I think almost everybody knows this already. So nice to be with you again. It's now weekly for me and bi-weekly for Nisabho. So yeah, things are it's kind of uneventful.
How are things, Ajahn? Anything special? Good to get the
Not
mic.
really. Yeah, just really enjoying this time. I would say it's been interesting after Ajahn Kovalo left, our dear friend. It's also neat to kind of just see dynamics and how dynamics work. We're like at each other's throats.
It's not.
Not true at all. Yeah, just it can be really simple just living with another person and living with another monk, especially. It's just really enjoyable. I'm just finding it so pleasant being here, and due to an injury I have been going on alms round for a while, quite a while now, and so Nisabho's doing that, and I'm very grateful for that. Otherwise, it might be hard if both of us were injured. But yeah, he's receiving food Monday through Friday out in town, in the village, so to say, and then the weekends we have visitors, and it's just the rhythm's really nice, and it's sort of a pretty subdued time for us, just quiet. There's no schedule, other than kind of just the alms round and the meal, and so it's really
Great.
good.
Yeah. I mean, it's rare to have time like quiet like this, honestly. In most places I've been, and the Buddha really recommended having at least the Vasa of 3 months. This isn't the official Vasa, but to have 3 months of retreat or something is like it's quite a gift. So, yeah, very very grateful to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the rainy retreat, rainy season. So, um, which in India is more in like July, August, September. So, but in the West, the natural time is really around this kind of darker, rainier time. So I'm just really appreciating things and really enjoying living with Nisabho, and it's good, very good. I was just talking with Ajahn Yaniko this afternoon about a Baigiri, and they're trying a different kind of schedule in a similar way too. Like they're only having about 4 or 5 monastics every 2 weeks who are sort of quote unquote on duty, and they're doing those 4 or so monastics. 5 monastics are doing the pujas every 2 weeks and kind of being around the area, and then they're all switching out. So they have almost like 2.5 months plus the rest of them who are not doing that on just kind of retreat.
Yeah.
So,
Quiet.
yeah. News-wise, Ajahn Samedo, if people hadn't heard, I don't know if we announced that last week.
No, he's back in.
He's back at Amaravati. So he's gone back to live at Amaravati indefinitely. So they have a very nice sort of hospital kuti they've made for him, and it's really outstanding. Very nice place to live. So that's quite a nice thing. I think I counted about 29, 30 monks who are there now, bhikkhus, fully ordained monks there. So
Yeah.
that's about it.
And there's I mean, it's been great to be on alms round and see everyone, but also a lot of people are going through quite a bit of difficulty, it seems. So, yeah, it's thinking of everyone, and if any of those people are on live stream, or I'm sure everyone has difficulties, but to have this community even virtually is a great gift. So I know we're glad to be part of it and able to kind of speak to some of these things a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the I think it's been a year of kind of health on people's minds, and a sense of our own mortality, and dealing with the pandemic. So and then also just the natural possibilities of just people aging and dying and being sick, and so that comes up even just on alms round, or just with people in the community here, or questions we have from people who are friends of the monastery, and so just keeping that in mind, sending our metta and our merit out to those.
Yeah, and I mean, it leads in well to this question as well we got from someone on Alms Round, in terms of how one can kind of investigate this stuff and these things in life. Ajahn, if you, I could read it, and then if you wanted
Yeah,
to.
sure.
So the question, which I think Ajahn is sort of touching on the edge of, is in formal practice, how should one use Dhammavichaya, investigation of Dhammas is a good translation, to deal with and dispel thoughts that come up. For example, if I'm feeling angry with someone, or I think we could also say if you're, having worry about someone or feeling a great deal of grief, and begin to think about this person, how should I contemplate to dispel these thoughts and come back to calm? And if we could give examples, that would be great.
So, in terms of the factors of enlightenment, Dhammavichaya is the second factor, right after sati. And so it's investigation of dhammas, investigation of phenomena, investigation of the truth, the teachings. There's a lot of ways that one can interpret it. And of course, there's a lot of ways that teachers actually say, well, this is what Dhammavichaya is, and this is what it isn't, or there are a lot of nuances to it. One way to think about this question is to think, well, what's the opposite or different about Dhammavichaya from something else like sati? So we've talked quite a bit about sati, and many of you have heard it just for many, many years, just about what is mindfulness. And mindfulness for most of us just is a sense of like looking within our own experience. It's not just like and for that the large percentage of that or amount of focus on that is usually our body. So it's really the Buddha said that was kind of the most important aspect and easiest way into understanding the Dhamma was just observing our own experience with our just ourselves, what it is to have a body, to feel things, to see things come up in our minds. So Dhammavichaya is more, you get more of an active investigation, and again, sati is sort of an investigation. It's a way of putting our attention on something. So Dhammavichaya would be, I think, different than that, different than kind of being aware of the body in terms of just what we're talking about, like sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, awareness, is investigating or looking at like what is it that the Buddha has kind of one way of it is what is the Buddha taught, what are the recommendations he has, what is it like, for example, bringing the Four Noble Truths. So in this, an example of if you're feeling angry at someone, you can look at just the dukkha. You can look at, as we've talked about before, an independent origination, like what are the causes and conditions for somebody to feel angry, or yourself, or what are the causes and conditions for this other person who you're sort of lacking compassion for in that moment. If you're feeling angry, you're kind of, the compassion's sort of gone out the door, so you're just angry at them. And so there are ways to kind of look at that and try to say, okay, I can see like this person's not intending necessarily harm to me, or they've been brought up in a particular way, or their genes or their environment or whatever it is has brought them to be this particular way right now. And so the cause and condition is there, and now anger is a condition as well that's arising from this, and looking at ourselves in that same way. And we can do the same with just looking at suffering. This is what the Buddha taught in terms of suffering. We can look at our own craving and see all of those truths. And then there's the other side of Dhammavichaya as well, not just looking at the teachings of the Buddha or investigating the truths, what he taught, and how that's coming up in our own experience, but something that Venerable Nisabho was talking about, we were both talking about before, and I'd like him to talk about, which is more of like investigation phenomena. So you were saying how...
Yeah, Dhamma can either mean kind of the Dhamma is in the teaching with a big D, or Dhamma is in Pali. It also has the meaning of object or phenomena. So, yeah, I mean, I think an interesting investigation of dhammas in this case, it's usually very yeah, active, and like Ajahn Chunda was saying, I think it can you know, you can apply any of these frameworks to something coming up, and hopefully it will lead to the factor in the enlightened factors that comes after investigation of dhammas is energy, virya. So I think a good kind of litmus test for if you're investigating correctly is if maybe it doesn't have to lead directly to energy, but it should be leading to wholesome states and kind of to the other enlightenment factors, which are, you know, tranquility of body, concentration. So, yeah, my sense is if sort of some form of anger comes up or something, then, you know, Ajahn Chah was once asked if we have to investigate every mental state that comes up and find how it came into being, or if we can just kind of sometimes know it. And he said it's like you're on a street and you've seen, you know, someone 1,000 times. Like, you don't have to go and ask what their name is and try to get to know them. You can just be like, oh, it's him again. And but then every now and again someone does come along and you haven't seen them often, and so then you do introduce yourself and trying to get to know them, learn their name. And I think that's a good metaphor for, you know, we just have some things that come into the mind, like old you know, anger we've been nursing for decades, where I think you can just know it and you don't have to get into it, and sort of come back to your main meditation object and be applying the mind there. But then some things I think it is really useful to, you know, say it's really sticking with you or it's a new thing, to really look at, you know, the conditions that brought it into being, to really investigate, like, okay, what is this person, what has made them like they are, what's their childhood been like, what's the situation that's causing this problem. And there is peace in that. Yeah, and then Ajahn, I would, like Ajahn was sort of referencing, I think there is a way I've heard investigation of dhammas applied by Tan Porley and Ajahn Jeff, where it's actually the turning one's attention back to the phenomena of the bodily breath energy and seeing how it's circulating. If you apply a perception, you know, say of light, you know, coursing through the body with the breath, how does that affect the experience as well? And I think that's very useful too. And with so many of these like mental states you've seen come up 1,000 times, I find just coming back to the body and not getting involved in them, they fade on their own. If you're managed to get like a decent amount of kind of well-being going in the body, then these sort of thoughts fade. If they don't, then I find it's useful to really get into them a bit more.
And also anger is, you know, I was just thinking about how you were talking about getting into, like, you know, like one of the pleasant experiences around anger is just watching its fading. And, you know, it's like the movement, sort of the, like the chetana, how the mind is moving, like that's sometimes translated as intention, might be to just really ramp up with anger. But when we don't do that, and when we just, instead of going to these thoughts that we have, just watching them and watching our own experience of our body, the very unpleasant feeling of anger, there's nothing more like kind of enjoyable, I find, than just like, you know, you just stick with it for a few minutes. If it's very intense, it can be a long time, but it just does go, kind of settles, and it does cease, and you see like, oh, in that ceasing there's peace. And so I just really, you know, when you can catch the mind, okay, this is anger and there's nothing skillful, you know, this is like a dead end. It's the same as like greed or lust, you know, you have it come up and it's like dead end. This is not going anywhere. You use that as a sign in your meditation. Dead end, you know, this is not going to lead me anywhere. Having this, you know, this angry kind of retort in my mind about this person, about what they said or what I'm imagining they said or what they might say, or a lustful feeling for someone or greed for an object. It's just great to just be like, not going there. This isn't going to help me. I'm going to die. pretty soon, and I don't have time for this. And it's just it's not helpful. So to flag that is great, but also just watching that experience, it's quite beautiful and helpful.
Yeah, and the Buddha gave us so many tools to investigate these experiences. Like we have the Four Noble Truths, like looking at the suffering and an experience of anger, like how does it feel hot? And if you see it clearly, it's really not pleasant, especially from a place of calm. You can see clearly. He had a way of looking at things where you look at how it arises, how it ceases, the advantages or the draw of it, like say the righteous rush you get when you're angry, the drawback, so that the fact that it never leads good places and it has actually a pretty unpleasant course feel, and the escape, which is sort of how you put it down, and that cessation. He had, the four bases of, there's just all these lists can be applied in this way, I think, as well. And then there's sort of these fun little tools you can use, which also I think fall under categories of Dhammavichaya, investigation of Dhammas, of mental phenomena. Like Longpo Sumedho would say, you can take each of your sort of neurotic mind states and characterize it as a different breed of dog. So you have, I think we all have like our, big floppy dogs, Labradors, and then you have like your scared Chihuahua in the corner. So you don't find these in the suttas, but actually they can spice things up a good deal and be pretty helpful.
Yeah, we do reference cats and dogs a lot.
It's true.
So we shouldn't exclude all the other wonderful animals too. We don't want to discriminate against.
You could categorize your mental state as any animal.
Yeah, it's okay. And we do have some other questions here. I was thinking there was this quote I was trying to remember around anger, which is something like, it's something around like, say something, say something in terms of anger, or use anger in speech. I'm going to mess up this quote. I can't remember exactly what it is, and you'll make the greatest speech you'll ever regret. So, to think that when we feel like anger is a feeling often that you're like, you feel righteous, like I am righteous, I can say this, I should say this, I'm right to say this, and then you never feel like so wrong. You feel like so wrong afterwards, and it's just think about somebody who's angry with you. It's really ugly. It's really not a pleasant thing. Some people can say like, oh yeah, there's reasons to get angry sometimes, but I'm not sure I completely agree with that. Maybe fierce, maybe have a strong expression towards somebody, but anger is more an expression of ill will, and I'm not sure I would actually agree that it's ever useful to use it. So anyway, we have some other another question here. Did you want to? This was about breath meditation. Did you want to kind of?
Sure.
Introduce that?
The question is, this person has been doing breath meditation as their main meditation in the evenings, doing the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the protective meditations, which is metta, asubha, contemplation of death, and recollection of the Buddha. And she uses guided meditations frequently. So our first question is, do you think it is okay to do only guided meditation, or is there a reason I should look to meditate without them at some point? And the second question is, would you advise to concentrate on one object/type of meditation for a good period of time first, and then go to another one, or it makes no difference to mix them all according to wish and the moment? Ajahn? So as to the guided meditation, I think it is very helpful to not have it at times, and it is very helpful to have it at times. In the mornings, I find that it is very helpful in terms of if you're in a sort of drowsy place to put on some speaker. I would make sure that there's someone who you really respect their Dhamma a lot, because I find that if you're meditating, you can listen to sort of a scholarly talk anytime and get knowledge, but your mind's so permeable in meditation that I think sort of the ineffable side of someone's voice really seeps into you when you're meditating. So you want that voice to be as pure as you can. So find a teacher you really trust, and yeah, that sort of calms you, and where you're not constantly trying to sort of remember exactly what they say. I mean, use it as a catalyst, I think. But for me personally, I find when I'm calm, that it it can be too much. And also that if I never give myself a chance to meditate without the guided meditation, then you never really get a chance to let the mind settle into that deeper calm. So I think it's important when you find the period during your day where your meditation can go deeper. Usually there's sort of one period where people tend to sort of gravitate to. Really protect that space and give yourself a chance to kind of, uh, really go into it and remain with one object. And when concentration moves along, the mind will become more involved in that object, and also it won't have a chance to develop the skill to grow quiet on its own without giving it some opportunity for that. So I'd say, yeah, it's important to protect some space where you don't have a guided meditation, and also that goes not just in a daily regimen, but in life as a whole, putting aside periods of retreat. The Buddha really recommended that his lay followers kept the Uposatha day once a week, full moon and half moon and new moons, really taking a Sabbath and turning off the electronics. He didn't say that. I'm interpolating a bit. And dedicating the day to practice. And just as setting aside a meditation session that's really quiet and protected in that way, even from, say, a Dhamma talk, I think putting aside a day every week if you can, or at least a few hours where you really try to focus on the Dhamma, protects that space of practice as well.
Yeah, I think the point about around guided meditations is that there's sometimes when you need them, sometimes when you don't. And I think in the beginning of practice, they can be very useful. And sometimes people, when they're starting to practice out, might need them quite a lot. But that doesn't mean later on that it's not something one can enjoy or use, or even find that one needs, even advanced meditators. I do think in one way of looking at it is sort of like training wheels. Like you kind of eventually take them off so you can see, like, what is your meditation like when you don't have this voice that's guiding you and bringing you back. And so that's one way of thinking about it, is like, at first we do need that. We do need that kind of guide because our minds aren't capable of it, and we're not guiding ourselves very well. We're guiding ourselves away from that, through our thoughts and our thought worlds, our other interests that keep competing for our attention in our minds, because what we are focusing on or trying to see clearly when we're being mindful is not maybe so interesting. So having somebody's voice bring you back, or having themes that they're bringing up, is helpful. But then as Tan Nisabho was saying, it's really important to find that you're developing skills where you're not needing that anymore, and you're finding it helpful to just have quiet time, see what you can do yourself. Also have the mind get to a deeper state. I often find that sometimes it's competing when you're listening to a guided meditation. One of the reasons that I don't listen to them so much anymore is I hope that there has been some skill gained, but and I can see that, but also that it's not the guide that I might be particularly listening to. It's not where my mind is needing to go at that point. I'm possibly in some sort of groove or something, or and then this voice comes and it sort of interrupts that, and so then I go into that, which is similar to what Tan Nisabho was saying. So I think there's places for it, and there's places when it's not so helpful. And another thing might be that there are times the mind, for even advanced meditators, just going up and down. We don't always have an advanced meditator's mind, even if we've been doing it a long time. So there's times when it's still needed and helpful, and I'll use that. Like metta, I find is quite helpful. So that's one take on guided meditation. The other thing is, eventually with training wheels, you are trying to learn how to be as independent as possible. And so similarly, when you're not on the cushion, you don't necessarily have this person speaking to you all the time, guiding your mind. And so you want to also be able to build a skill where you don't have that, and you're able to kind of walk around and be in have your attention focused on what it is that you're doing, your own body, what's actually happening, or Dhammavichaya, as we've been talking about. So not necessarily needing that voice is an important aspect of developing the practice.
That being said, I do still slap on the training wheels at least once a day, usually.
Oh.
So I love a good Dhamma talk during one of my meditation sessions, usually. So
yeah,
I definitely utilize it.
And there can be resistance to it as well. So like resistance to good medicine. So it might be that you are, wanting to stray and think about other things, and you might unconsciously be resisting this thing that could be helpful for you. So it's also something to look at. So the other question was, would you advise to concentrate on one object or type of meditation for a good period of time first, and then go to another one, or it makes no difference to mix them according to wish in the moment? And I would just say simply, this is an object of investigation. We have to see whether we're somebody who sticks to the breath for 30 years and we find it completely enthralling and interesting, and we have no need to go to any other type of kind of meditation, or we're better suited to kind of bring things up just as our mind needs kind of nuances and interests. We might want to develop our skills, or also just our own kind of curiosity might be, maybe I'll try something else right now. So my own take is that it just depends on the person, but also the question around no difference to mix them up. No, there is a difference. I mean, you want to learn what is appropriate and what's not appropriate for you to be using. So, if you're tired, then maybe breath meditation in the early morning is not something you necessarily want to do, and you're just kind of keeping yourself asleep. So one needs to learn what's best for oneself, but particularly like using one or the other, I think is up to each person.
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah, I agree, Ajahn, and I think the usefulness or utility of breath meditation is, first, the Buddha sort of singled it out as the abode of the Tathagata, he called it. So his main object, or the one that he really praised time and again, and it's such a safe object and basis. And as so many of the other meditations we use, say metta or a mantra, rely initially on a applied image or phrase, which then initiates, a deeper experience, say, of loving kindness in the heart. But the initial pathway to that, and what we're sort of feeding into the process, is a pretty fragile tool. It's just a perception. It's just a few words. And my experience is, if it's effective, especially if it's effective, then the defilements will find a way to block it very quickly. I think we've all had that experience of finding like a metta phrase that works great for a day, and then after a week, it's completely blank. And the beauty of the breath is that if you gain access to those sort of vital energies in the body and that sense of well-being, then I think it can really potentize the sort of more verbal meditations you might choose to use as well, say metta. So I'd say a good, strategy is to really, maybe you need to start with a bit of metta just because the mind's active, and then touch into the breath. But I'd say it is useful for many people to have the breath there to touch into pretty regularly, because it can really sustain one, and it can kind of, it can be a indicator for what the effects of the other meditation is, because you can really feel if the breath is getting tight, or the breath is a reactive energy, so it will react and indicate what the effects of the meditation are in a very clear way if you're sensitive to it. So not to say everyone has to have the breath there, but I find it's very helpful alongside almost every one of these other meditations you might bring. And it's a pretty safe bet if you're really in that doubting place where you don't know where to go with the meditation. If you come to the breath, it's usually it's a safe resting spot.
And I wanted to say, like, and the breath, one might be like, well, I don't really like it, or it's not helpful, and But there's different ways of looking at breath meditation. So like we don't have to just think about it as like a particular single method that the Buddha taught, because he kept things pretty general. He just said, like, put the attention to the fore, so like, which is in front of you, and we can think of that as the face, or we can think of that as he also talks about the breath body. So there's all kinds of ways of interpreting what he meant by the breath. One of the techniques I use is from Ajahn Jeff, is just really feeling the breath in the entire body. So it's like how the breath manifests itself throughout my experience of really the energy within the whole body. So breathing in, breathing out, and how that breath energy moves. Others might find it like they just want to concentrate just on this particular feeling right underneath their nostrils. So there's so many ways to investigate it and look. And so if one is like, I hate breath meditation, you might also want to look at, like, well, why? What's the reason? Is there something you could open up to think about it in a different way?
Yeah, and even just having it there on the side. I mean, I think of it as rice, and then you're putting all these other flavors of like metta or this or that on it. But in the Anapanasati Sutta, one's sensitive to breathing in and out as they're engaging in all these other contemplations. So it doesn't have to be a full-on breath. It can just sort of be there in the back as a way to kind of calm things, maybe.
And we've talked about the nada sound as well with that, like just listening to this sound one hears. That's like this sort of ethereal, like hissing sound or whatever. And that again is a similar thing. Like you're using that as a background for a way that your mind is kind of drawn to, so that you're staying in the present, you're staying aware, and not being drawn into your obsessions or your thoughts or whatever it might be. So there are all kinds of meditations and objects, and I think it's just encouraging for people to kind of look at them, but then also to be aware of eclecticism, where people are just wanting to constantly move around. They're not comfortable with any meditation object, and they just want to kind of mix this and mix that, and go Tibetan in this way, and then Zen, and then bring in the Theravada here, and just to be very careful, because what that can end up being is just not a very deep understanding of the mind. One can kind of metaphor that's often used is like dig a bunch of little holes rather than a very deep hole. And it's the deep hole that maybe one can uncover Nibbana, but not with the many shallow holes.
Or like that food metaphor, like a PB&J with like a hamburger on top and some rice and then curry, and
just doesn't taste good after a while.
better stick with something simple.
Yeah. So we had some other questions on the live stream. One of them is an interesting question. I'll just read it. I'm thinking of possibly ordaining, and wanted to ask if achieving enlightenment as a layperson is possible. Then what are the advantages or reason for leading a monastic life? Should I ordain? Well, I mean, like, obviously, like, we're gonna have our own view on that. So, we're monks, and I think there's a definite bias in terms of that. And there's a lot of ways to answer this. I think the basic and easiest way to answer it is just to say, well, it's a lot easier, I think, to sort of penetrate the path being a monastic. And I would say that in comparison to my lay life, that there were a lot more distractions and difficulties and things that were made that deep penetration understanding of Dhamma less accessible. I wouldn't say, just to answer the question, the Buddha never said in anywhere that a person who's not a monk or a nun cannot realize enlightenment. He never said that. We can see, though, in the suttas that there is a more, the numbers, at least, that are presented in the suttas, is there's a lot more monks and nuns who are realizing Nibbana, or any of the four stages of enlightenment, than there are lay people. But there are examples where there are, I think, one or two where there are lay people who are enlightened. There's even examples of lay people teaching monks. There's surely examples of lay people realizing the other sort of three levels of enlightenment, and So it's not like a like this state or understanding or realization that's only reserved for monastics. But I think it's more about ease, and that's the most simple way to put it. That the robes, in a way, protect our life in by taking on the robes, by ordaining, in a way that sort of protects the Dhamma within our own mind, protects our own possibilities for penetration. And that's why I would say, for me, in a more simplistic way, one would want to ordain. There's renunciation is kind of the main word that comes up with ordination. Letting go of worldliness and worldly life, and that's one of the things that can be more difficult for people. But that's what it ends up being as well. So I'm interested to hear what you
Yeah, Jin.
to say.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into a bit what Venerable Dhamma is saying. Why are our minds resistant to good medicine from time to time? And yeah, this is the robes kind of help us, make us take the medicine a bit more at times. And for some character types, that's very helpful. Like I really, the robes are very helpful for me in that way. And yeah, it's a helpful form. I think that one just needs to, you know, go to a monastery for a while if you're interested and stay there, see how it goes. If at the very worst, you spent some time at a monastery with a good teacher, no worries. But I do, and I've certainly have found it to be a really lovely way of living life. But, I do want to speak also to all those who don't have the conditions or maybe the inclination allowing them to take on robes. And just that my sense is, you can really practice. I've seen many people really dedicate themselves as lay people, and the forms that the Buddha gave for his lay disciples are quite comprehensive as well, and I don't think they're utilized enough, because that's the beauty of the robes, is there's these sort of forms and rules and ritual which hold one, and there's quite a few for people who aren't in robes. To take one day a week and really dedicate it as a Sabbath, like really put it aside and practice, to hold the 5 precepts, to really be clear that you will not lie, you will not kill, you will not steal, you will not engage in sexual misconduct, you will not take intoxicants. And then on that one Sabbath day to maybe take even 8 precepts if you were so inclined, but to really make sure you have a Buddha image in your house in a high spot. I think most houses have, the liquor cabinet in the highest spot. And to understand that the power of the robes is this external form and the community that holds one on the path of practice and protects the Dhamma. And that whether or not you have a chance to formally ordain, there's great opportunity for those bringing more forms into one's life, in terms of like this Sabbath day, or in terms of drawing closer to community as you all are, taking retreat once every year if you can, at least in like a longer retreat. So, and finding more time for seclusion. And I just know that people can really see Dhamma practitioners in general and monks as giving up all this. But as you all are watching, you must know also, like, practitioners of Dhamma are the real hedonists. Like, life takes on a freshness when you practice that's really beautiful, and simple things become sustaining. And so just to say that, I think as everyone has the opportunity to steer their lives towards more faith, more community, and a bit more seclusion, perhaps, and to sort of go against the worldly stream. But to the person who asked that question, if you can give it a go, then why not? No.
Yeah, I think one of the ways of talking about it in terms of like kind of like I think the main points that I would say around it is that for Dhamma practitioners, it's really about, and you touched on this quite a bit. It's about where one puts one's heart, and you can have somebody, even though we obviously would agree that ordination is quite a beautiful thing, and we're happy to be ordained and find it helpful. We obviously are doing this for that reason. Hopefully, we're not doing it for that it's unhelpful and it's causing us misery and dukkha. But at the same time, like, I think one looks at one's conditions, and if it's not a possibility, the other thing to really think about is like how one is practicing the Dhamma, and that's what Nisabho was also illustrating. And basically, with somebody who's ordained, you can have somebody who's ordained, but they're only ordained externally, but they're not ordained in the heart. So that would be somebody who's just, basically like they've put on the robes, they've gone through, just like their rituals, their practices, they're kind of just going through their life. And we've seen this in our own lives with monastics as well. And surely this can also happen just as a thing that just comes up in one's monastic life, gets bored and you're not interested in anymore. But for the most part, like, it is possible that one could be just ordained externally, but not in the heart. You're just not really focusing on Dhamma that much. And then conversely, one can be not ordained, and a layperson, and really be ordained in the heart. And so just putting an enormous amount of dedication and interest and, just putting the Dhamma as the first and foremost in one's life. And these things that Nisabho talked about with the Aposta today, taking on the 8 precepts for a time, or just taking them on if you can. I mean, that alone is incredible. I mean, just that is being celibate. So, and if one's not able, or if the conditions aren't there for the 8 precepts, the 5 precepts are incredible as well. I mean, just like the precepts around speech and just non-harming and not taking it. If one really lived by those, if people just lived by one precept, if everybody in the world lived by one precept alone, think about what that would do for the entire planet. I mean, just the first precept, like, I won't kill, is incredible. And so the point being is that there are many reasons that one could talk about the positive effects of ordination, and that it is something that if one could dedicate one's life to go forward with, it's wonderful, but also that you could lose your interest, you could disrobe. It's not necessarily a sure win situation, and one can find the same amount of potential with the Dhamma, based on where one's heart goes as a non-ordained person. And but there's pluses and negatives, and there's always, as Nisabho said, you can try it out. So I think that's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah, good. But contact Abhayagiri.
Or anywhere. There's a lot of other places. We don't. Yeah, like for example, the Hermitage. There's not ordination isn't possible here. The Hermitage, the sort of the way the Hermitage is a place just where monks come after they've been ordained for a while. I think it's usually a few years, and have got some training down. So, and then there was.
Well, yeah, Dave Tetro asked, hello, Venerables. Since doubt is the 5th hindrance, could you please speak about what this refers to? What should we not doubt? Thank you. My sense, Dave, is, so the 5th hindrance, which is the hindrances are the sort of things that take us away from calm or a unified mind in meditation. And, this hindrance is sort of, what's the right word? One of the beauties of the Buddha's teaching is his invitation to investigate. And there are things that one does have doubt about until final realization, namely, like if nibbana is possible. But this, I find, is sort of that neurotic, ceaseless, unending, insatiable movement flipping back and forth and back and forth, like what meditation object should I use? What should I, where should I put my mind? What should I do about this situation? And I think this is perhaps one of the most debilitating hindrance for Westerners, or sorry, I shouldn't use that term at the moment, just people in the modern world. So many cultural distinctions are now moot. Just that when the Buddha speaks about the antidote to this hindrance, he speaks about seeing bright states as bright and dark states as dark. So that sounds very simple, but what I take it to mean is, one, instead of looking at the object of doubt, say the issue that's really got one wound up, just turning the attention back to the mind itself and its state. And if one sees that it's in this doubting, wavering state that will never come to a conclusion, then that is what one can really look at, and then wait until sort of a more wholesome state comes before reapproaching whatever the decision is. And just taking the sort of mind itself as the object rather than the object of the doubt as the object, because that doesn't go anywhere, I think. And then really calming the body really does help, I think. And the Buddha also recommended breath meditation for helping a bit with this, I believe. So
sometimes we talk about like doubters in the Sangha or something like that, like he's a doubter or something. So it can be a tendency for particular people as well. Like some people don't doubt a lot; they're just very decisive. But if one's a doubter, it can be, as Nisabho said, it can be very debilitating, and it's good to actually identify being caught in this hindrance to see it as doubt. And I think one of the most important things around doubt, which was mentioned, was basically that there's no end to it. It doesn't have an end. If you think that answering your question is going to end your doubt, it doesn't, because then another question arises. And so it's just important to kind of sort of, as Nisabho was talking about, you're rising above your own mind in terms of being able to see, like, okay, this is just doubt. This is just the hindrance. There's nothing I can really do to answer the question or that would be satisfying for me. So you're really seeing it as a delusional state of mind. And it usually, the way that it's brought up is like doubt around the practice, or doubt around the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So it's kind of seen as like, what should I do? How should I do this? Am I doing the right thing? One of the things that people bring up a lot is doubting around whether I'm actually doing this correctly, which goes to this first question that we answered around the type of meditation. It's sort of like, should I do another type of meditation? What should I do? And one of the things is really just investigating the experience of doubt, the dukkha in it, but also like not putting externally the answer. So like you ask somebody else to answer the question. Like, unfortunately, or fortunately, as you might think about it, Dhamma practice is really about putting the question here and really putting the responsibility here on ourselves. So we have to kind of figure out for ourselves, like, when the hindrance of doubt is coming up, and also like, what do we do about it? What's skillful? And what's often skillful is just knowing doubt, just really knowing, okay, that's what this is. And once we know, then we can move on from it. Because once you know that it's doubt, okay, this is doubt, it's not going anywhere, then I'm not going to actually try to answer this question. I'm not going to get into it at all. It's sort of like, Mara, I see you. And then once Mara is seen, it's sort of like, oh yeah, I don't have to be, we can actually let go of it. So this thing that's really causing such a weight on our own minds, to have something answered, to have our minds flitting back and forth, not understanding how we can answer something or see the conclusion of it. It's just seeing that itself allows it to diminish, and then we gain our sort of power back, or our confidence, and we're able to kind of move back into like really understanding our own experience rather than being unsure of what's actually going on.
And I agree, Ajahn, and the doubt relates to Nick as well. And I do remember you, Nick, and Yeah, Long Propasno says wisdom will take you to the edge, but faith is what lets you jump. So, yeah,
And another translation of faith is confidence. So
yeah, but yeah, if you got the time and the opportunity and the will, it's a good life.
yeah,
And the world could use some more monks. So,
yeah, and nuns.
yeah.
So I think it's about 7:20 now, and we have kind of gotten to the end. Unless you're doubtful.
I'm not doubtful.
All right.
Good.
So it's been nice, sort of seeing everybody else, or you seeing us, and or imagining you there. I really like the chat. Is quite helpful. I know it's probably not helpful for you to see me or Ton Nisabho looking up. We have this huge screen above, and we can see the chat there.
It's very intimidating.
And it's obviously more helpful to keep our eyes down.
I still don't know where these Anjali emoticons come from, Ajahn. Everyone seems to have them, but
maybe we'll
we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out later. But yeah, they're nice. We like the Anjalis and the emoticons. All those, every now and again, if we get there they are, get a thumbs down, we can work with that too. Okay, well, be well. Have a good few days until Ton Nisabho's next Dhamma talk. And I will see you, if I live so long and am healthy and have the mind to do it, next week. I'm okay, but
he's okay.
You never know.
It's the Theravada fine print. We're obligated